Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show. Today, my guest is Laura. I got to say some things about her before I allow her to introduce herself. She is probably the biggest reason why I started this podcast, to be honest with you. And before that, she motivated me to continue with my writing and take it more serious. And I'm just so glad that I have her on the show. Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell people a little something about yourself?
Sure. Firstly, I wish you could see my facial reactions
I can see
to
your
the
facial
things that you were
reactions. You
saying.
can't
Oh,
see
you can?
mine. I'm not always
Oh, that's
staring at
not
it, but
fair.
yes.
Well, if you saw them, I'll describe it for people who aren't going to see it. I was like, what? I have to say one of the biggest and best feelings that I've ever gotten to experience is being able to influence someone to do something that fulfills them or brings them a lot of joy. And it's not like I do it for that feeling, but to know that that's happened is oh, it feels so good. So I'm so glad and so pleasantly surprised to hear that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an important thing. I think it's what kind of society would we have if people weren't inspiring other people? You know what I mean?
yes, but I mean that you take that time to think about where that came from. I really appreciate that. And on the other hand, you have been so kind about the stuff that I'm trying to do, my podcast and such, and sharing it every single time. I
Every
really
time I see
appreciate
it,
it.
yeah, yeah.
It's so nice. And again, there are some times where I feel like I'm just kind of talking to my mother-in-law in Utah. She's my biggest fan.
Hmm.
And sometimes I feel like I'm recording all these episodes just for her. And even if that's the case, that's okay. By way of introduction, I have two children and my husband. His name is Brady. We are both over here in South Korea. My husband works for the US military. I'm a personal trainer and fitness instructor, have been for about 10 years. And this is where it gets kind of like, what is your one direction in life? Because I have the most random hodgepodge bag of talents, skills, interests. I mean, if you can't see me, I have bright blue hair that's in a big grown out mohawk. I'm half Japanese and half American.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I love Korean culture. I love Korean food, which is where we're at right now. People
Right, right.
listening are like, what does that have to do with anything? The other thing that I have a lot of interest in is voice work. So, doing voice work, different voices. I have a podcast where I do readings of classic literature, and they're always recorded live, which adds a higher pressure, different element to
Yes,
it.
yes.
But what I really enjoy is something that I'm trying to embrace later in life. And I feel like this is kind of a blessing that happens hopefully sooner in life than later. But in your 30s and 40s, that you really become a little more settled. You start to hopefully care less about what people think and care more about what you think. Am I okay with who I am and what I believe in and what I stand for and what I do? And because of that, I have been more open to making mistakes. And I grew up being taught, not directly, but indirectly in so many ways, that mistakes aren't okay and mistakes mean failure and mistakes are embarrassing. And lately, really trying to embrace that mistakes are part of success and not
Yes.
just part of success, but part of life and part of humanity. And that we fail before we're successful. That's part of it. And so, in these recordings and readings that I do, because they're live and they're more of a live performance than really a recording, I make mistakes. I read in the wrong character's voice. I mix up my words
Yeah, yeah.
but just remembering that that's okay. So hopefully if there are readers out there who listen to the story and hear me make my mistakes, it gives them permission to also make their own mistakes when they're reading themselves or doing some kind of performance or other kind of they take a test and they don't do so hot. That's
Yeah.
all part of the process. Anyway,
Yeah,
that was a
anything where
long way to introduce who I am.
yeah, yeah. Well, I understand what you're saying. It's anything where you put yourself out there, you sort of take a risk of failure. And
Right.
yeah, I listen, I agree totally with what you're saying. I had a martial arts instructor when I was like a
Mm.
young man in my teens, I think, who said something about you know you learn more from your mistakes or your failures than you do from your successes. And in my through my path in life, right, I've had times where I was very successful in things and times where I just stunk. But yeah, I agree with. I feel that success could be a liar sometimes. You think you're
Mm.
doing something the right way because you're getting success, but you actually aren't. If that makes any sense to you.
I feel like I put failure in quotes because it's what we think is failure,
Right.
But really we should think of it as a, step in progress. But I think failure has so much more motivating potential.
Hmm.
And I mean, it can be absolutely devastating to your motivation to fail and just say, I want to quit. But like you were saying, if you do it and you nail it, or you think you nail it, I mean, what's the point in practicing? What's the point in, I mean, you think you already did it, but if you can see, I'm at about 20% and I would really like to get that performance level higher, then you
Right.
have, I don't know, you can see. And I know as a teacher, when I teach people things, there are sometimes when I see a student and they are just on point. There might be some little changes here and there that I can see, okay, let's address this, let's address this. But sometimes when I have students and that's good, but there's sometimes when I have students come to me and they have a whole lot of work that we need to do that I think, oh, good, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's, oh, good, there's so much potential and progress and room for improvement. Like this is going to be a great teacher student relationship. They're going to come so far. But if they're already there, it's like, well, I can tweak this and tweak this, but I mean,
Right.
well, you're already there,
Yeah.
you know?
So I like to take a moment to because I think we're talking because we know each other.
Yes.
Just to explain a little bit for people why I said what I said when I introduced you. So I mean, this is 2020. Everybody knows how crazy this year was, but it didn't. We got to remember, go back. It didn't start off that way. It started off pretty much like a normal year, but when things start to go south or started to go south,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was introduced to you, and it was via my wife Daniela, and I'm a reader. I love stories and stuff like that, and she never was, but she came across you out through the spouses page on Facebook for Camp
Uh-huh.
Humphreys, and she was just enamored with you. She was like, she listened to you. I don't know what you were reading. It was the very first thing that you did, and
Secret
she's like,
Garden.
yeah, maybe. And she was like, yeah, you gotta listen to this. I was listening to it, and she meant to just kind of like briefly listen, and she got hooked. She
Oh,
listened to the whole
yes.
chapter. She and she told me about it, and then I got into it. And I was listening. I was like, yes, this is awesome. It reminded me when I was a kid. This is how I fell in love with books. This is what
Mm.
I would say first grade, but as far as my memory goes back, I had a teacher who would read, and that was the absolute best part of my day of my life, if I
Oh.
remember as a kid, when I would listen to her tell those stories, and you took me back to that. And
Oh.
but it's not only that, is that why I think you put out a little something like why you were doing it or something, or at least maybe it's in my own head. It was so that people who are stuck at home have another option, something to do, and I thought that was just fantastic. I want to thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, sure. I feel like there are things that each individual person is really spectacular at, and so many other things that we're just really not that good at. And I've learned to kind of embrace that as I get older. And bless my poor husband's heart, I am not a cook. I do not cook. I'm okay at cleaning. I'm not like extra great, but I just can do it. But yeah, cooking's not my thing. So when COVID came about, and one of the things that you see as such a regular way of helping other people is to bring them food, right? It's
Right.
people need food, you give food, the food tastes good, everybody's happy. And when you don't cook, it's like, I can't even give them a hug or a high five right now. And so I was thinking, what are some talents of mine that I
Mm,
can give
right.
service to the community that isn't just, and not that it's not helpful, but that is a little more personal than just money. And this was one of them. I was like, how could I do this? And then when you come into contact with all those copyright restrictions, and
Oh,
that's
geez,
why we
yeah.
went to the classic literature because
Right,
it's
right.
out of the copyright. It's in the public domain. So we began reading with just the Secret Garden just for fun, just to see. I didn't think I honestly that I was going to stick with it because I don't know, all those little side projects you think you're going to do, and
Yeah.
then you do it
So
for a
so
couple
walk
days
walk me
and
back here before all of that. Like
sure.
did you want to start off as cuz you do the voice thing as just reading, or you wanted to do a regular podcast? Like when did you start, like
Oh.
this thing started to build in your mind, and then you went and started buying like the equipment and planning to do it? Cuz I just went through that whole process recently, and I would love to hear you share like that with me and the rest of the listeners.
Well, you have way more fantastic equipment than I do. I mean, me, I got like you can't see. I mean, you can see, but not the audience. I got like a fan in the background here. I got like a suitcase in the corner. Usually, my
Oh, you
dog
can't
is
see
like,
what I got. I'm like in a shed.
okay. Well, I mean, like in other words, the setup for me, I have like a ring light and a mic. And that was for my birthday. So
There
it
you
wasn't
go.
like this professional endeavor that I went into. It was more that I found myself enjoying it more than I had
Do
hoped
you
it would be
listen?
well received and for
Uh-huh.
people to cling on to it and for people to find that companionship because the isolation that has come during this time when people are sick and having to be separated, when parents are home with their kids rather than having their kids going to school, and parents like me
That was really
trying to
hard,
think
yeah.
of how can I entertain my kids besides just giving them a device. And I don't judge you if you do. I don't
Right,
judge you
right.
for that. My hand is raised, guilty.
Yes, yes, same
If
here.
that, and so I wanted to provide a source that was free, that was entertaining, that was wholesome, that was educational, that still had that excitement, that fun, that creative process available. And so once I got into, I mean, performing these readings, and if you haven't listened, one of the things that you saw me catch my earbud, one of the things that I do that I think is different than some other readers is that I'm really performing rather than
Yes.
just
Oh,
reading the
yes. It's art.
text.
It's art.
But well, that's very nice. I don't know
I
that
no, I
everybody
it
would call
is.
it that, but I
I'm right. I'm always
appreciate
right.
that. Oh, is
It is
that?
art.
Does your wife agree? Does she
No,
say
she's
yes?
always right. She's not here. That's why I said I'm right, because she's
Oh,
not
how
here right
funny!
now.
Happy wife, happy life. Very good.
Exactly. I agree
Um,
with that.
so it's not just, and some people do this very successfully with audiobooks as a performer. They just read the text as is, and they give some emotion and feeling
Mm.
to the text, and they communicate what's happening, but they don't necessarily impersonate the characters. They don't necessarily take on each individual character as a role.
And
As a
and that's what
role.
I mean about you remind me of that first grade teacher. She became the characters.
She
She would
did. How
move
lucky are
her
you?
if she was talking about a witch, she would just morph like
Yeah.
into a witch. You know what I mean? Like her mannerisms, her face. You're doing that same exact thing, and I love it. That's why I say it's a performance and it's art. It
Yes.
really is. Don't
And
argue with me right here,
I
okay? It's art.
well, that's very kind. I really really enjoyed it, and as much as I wanted to continue to bring that, I don't want to say gift, but just whatever I could bring to the community at large, as far as the service, I found myself wanting to get back into these characters chapter after chapter because
Yes.
I was experiencing the literature in such a deeper way that I had never experienced it before. They talk about actors. It's not like
Embodying
I'm
a
doing
role.
method acting, which
Right, right, right.
I'm not saying
You're
that.
not Marlon Brando?
No, oh heavens, no. So nothing like that. But when I'm putting myself in the role of these characters and having read through and paying enough attention to each individual word as you never do unless you're reading and performing something out loud,
Right, exactly, yes.
the understanding of who these characters are and why they're saying what they're saying and how they would say it and was presented these books to me in a totally new level that I had never even considered. So I found myself rediscovering these books in a whole different way. These books that a lot of times, because they're older, the mannerisms are different.
Yes.
The language can be more complicated for people to understand, not
Hmm.
always, user friendly, as some people would say. That some people find it just hard to connect to. And the
Hmm.
way that I've performed it has forced me to connect with these characters. And I mean, there are times you'll see in some of the more emotional chapters of my readings that I'm crying.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not crying from this is Laura and how she feels in this moment. It's that when I am Jane Eyre and I am finding out something really terrible on my wedding day, I'm emotional as Jane Eyre, not as Laura,
Yeah.
because
And
I'm
that's the
I'm
art part.
so entrenched in the
Yeah.
character.
You're
And there's this
embodying the characters, yeah.
Well, I don't even know that it's happening. And there's this little voice that's Laura back here who's just kind of watching in the back seat, like watching Jane
Yeah.
take over, who's like, girl, are you seriously like crying right now? You know what I mean? Like there's some bit of Laura that's still conscious on some level. It's like, really? Is this really happening? And then she says, girl, just go. Just do it. Like that's part of it. Just let it go. Don't hold it back. Don't try to talk it down. Don't, that's part of it, and love it and hold on to it, like let it
She's a
blossom, let it
cheerleader
go.
and kind of a director, I guess, at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, as a one woman show, doing all the I guess. I never thought of
Yeah.
it like that.
So you made me think of two things that are related, and because I'm a writer, I'm gonna talk about those things.
Sure.
So one of the key things you usually get as advice for writing is to read your work out loud to yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
do that myself. I have my wife do it, and I've worked with you for a bit of that. And the reason why is that I think for that same thing that you're talking about, that you get into it more in a different way. So it helps with your writing. You know, I
Absolutely.
my writing is at its best when a person doesn't have to think about what I just wrote. They read it and
Mm,
it's there. And that leads me to think about, everyone considers, well, for English speakers, everyone considers Shakespeare to be the greatest writer. Maybe I'm sure there's people who argue with that, but whatever, right? That's not the point of what I'm trying to say. The point is that he didn't write novels, he wrote plays. So he
hmm.
wrote and said it out loud and had other people say it out loud. And then they performed it. And next year they performed it again if it was really good. So it constantly went through steps of evolution and changing and shaving off a little bit here and adding there to get it so perfect. And I think that's probably why his writing, people still talk about it even 400 years later now.
That makes sense. I have never thought of that he showed it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, and he had to. And the drama that has to come with those words, that
Yeah.
you are responsible for bringing the meaning to the words. If you just read it as is, there's no drama included,
Yeah.
you know? Wah. It'd be very wah wah wah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's switch it up a little bit. We're 20 minutes
Sure.
in, and I usually shoot for anywhere between a half hour to an hour because I know people are busy, and I want people
Sure.
to just sort of, get some quick information in their podcasting.
Hmm.
Um, you recently, I saw some posts that you were talking about your spirituality or religion. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that. I belong to or believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which most people coin or know as the Mormons.
Right,
And
right.
the reason we're called or have been coined the Mormons is that one of our books of scripture, so the New Testament, the Old Testament, but the one that we're kind of known for is called the Book of Mormon.
Mm.
So it's not that we think this name belongs to
Oh, okay.
God or that it's like this other Jesus kind of person. Nothing like that. It's just,
Okay.
it was the name of that book that we were known for because it was
So
different.
everyone kind of just calls you guys the Mormons because you've added that book to the Old Testament and the New Testament. Am I correct
Correct.
with that? Okay.
Yeah. And I would hesitate to say add. It's
Okay.
like a companion. So it's not like we took the New Testament, Old Testament, and then added it on to the end as the same book, if
Right.
that makes
Okay.
sense. But it's
Yes.
another text.
Okay. I didn't mean it that way, but yes. But thank you for
You
clarifying
know
for
what I
people
mean?
who are listening. Yes.
Just in case.
So I'll share something with you. I never really been a religious person,
Hmm.
kind of coming up, but I've never been a person who was like, oh, absolutely no way, there isn't, a God and all that stuff. And as I gotten older, I kind of just gotten a little bit more spiritual.
Hmm.
But within the last, say, 2 years, that's definitely a year. Like when I lost my mom
Hmm.
a little over a year ago, and then I lost my uncle about 4 months after her. And then some things kind of went down at work and life that kind of just really got me to my lowest place.
Hmm.
And I have a friend who's a psychologist. He's a professor right now, and but he's very religious, and we would talk about religion a lot all the time. And I've read some other things about it, and I just started talking to God. I wanted to have a relationship with Him, so I don't
Hmm.
really follow like a prescribed religion or anything like
Sure.
that. But I just have a dialogue. Whenever I close my eyes and I'm sort of like resting, like say right before I go to bed or right before I wake up, or sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up. I converse with God. And I don't know how or why, but I honestly feel like my life has changed for the better since then.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I won't necessarily speak on behalf of all Mormons,
Right.
in quotes and air quotes. We all have our various personal beliefs within the religion itself. It's tricky because all religions come with a lot of cultural beliefs that are
Yes.
kind of picked up here and there on the side, that a lot of them I'm like, no, thank you. And
Yeah.
that's totally okay. And then there's what we call the doctrine, which is if you don't believe one of these things, you have a
Kind of the strict
fundamental
dogma. Yeah.
disagreement with something that is, one of a couple things that are really a part of this specific belief process. So, on behalf of myself, I think having that personal relationship with God, and not even necessarily God, but the divine, whatever you
Yeah.
consider to be the
Whatever you want to
thing
call it,
that,
right?
you know, attaches us all as humanity together, whatever you think that might be, is, I mean, I know a lot of very religious people in all sorts of religions that don't have that, who
Yeah.
follow just you go to church on Sundays or whatever day it is, you do ABC, and that personal, heartfelt connection with God or whoever is missing. To have that relationship is probably one of the most valuable things that I have. Just like any other relationship that you have, it's back and forth communication. It's a daily thing. So it's, if you have a parent that would be upset if you didn't call them, it's the same kind of thing. And maybe not so much, hey, how come you didn't call me? But just I miss you. I want to
Yeah.
check in with you and I really care about you. I think one of the other things that believing in a higher power has really changed my life in a deep, profound way is viewing humanity around me in such an incredibly different level of compassion.
Yeah. I can see that.
My religious, this is for all different kinds of people. There are people who have the same kind of compassion who have no religion whatsoever. So it's not
Yes. Yes. You don't
particular
have
to
to be
me.
religious to have compassion, right?
Oh, absolutely not. For me, my religious beliefs and spiritual beliefs motivate the reasons why I have the compassion that I do for other people, and to remember that we are all in this together, that we are all doing our best. We're all making all sorts of mistakes, all up and down. And that the goal isn't to get there before anybody else. It's to bring as many people with you as you can. And that doesn't mean bring as many people with me to my church that I go to. For
Right.
me personally, it's to bring as many people with me to feel the sincere, real to me love of God. And so love of God to me means being loved completely, wholeheartedly, but at the same time being seen exactly as you are. So that's with all your flaws, that's with things that are in progress, knowing that there have been mistakes and that you're currently still making and that you will make, but that you are still seen and loved completely,
I, th-
wholeheartedly.
I
And
think
that
that's
to
really
me is
healthy.
backed up by my religious beliefs. There are some people that don't need the religious beliefs to back that up,
Right.
and who just are that way. But that has been huge for me. Huge for me. It's a huge thing to aim to,
I
also.
think that's a really, really healthy for anyone, healthy mindset to kind of have through life. And for me, I think that when I started to commune with God, I was saying that there's more out there than just me, and also that it humbled me. It made me
Mm.
appreciate things more. My relationship with my family, even down to the food I was eating, or
Mm.
even now like doing the podcast and I'm connecting with people that I haven't talked to. Yesterday, I talked to someone I haven't talked to in almost 30 years, and it was
What?
and it was like yesterday. We just got into like old patterns, and I was like, thank you for that. If I didn't humble myself daily, I don't know if I could have done this right now.
Oh, I
If that
love
makes
that.
sense, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And there are some times when I consider the opposite and being without that kind of belief in my life, I would so much rather be feeling grateful to something that I believe loves me than feeling like, oh, I got lucky, or
Right.
oh,
Yeah, yeah. It
what a
completely
fun
changes your
chance.
mindset. Yeah.
Hmm.
I study
Hmm.
psychology. Yeah, got a master's and stuff, and
Oh, wow.
a lot of that stuff is kind of there's similarities about that, about having there's a lot of doctrine in psychology about putting purpose and meaning in your life,
Mm.
and having religion too, but like for where I'm not very religious, but I feel a connection to God. It changes everything, that there is someone out there, like you said. It is much better for me, let me not put it into other people's words, it is
Right.
much better for me to go through life thinking that someone out there is looking out for me and cares about me on a grander scale, right? Because I know I have my parents and friends and stuff like this, but this is sort of like on a cosmic level. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
it just when I get something that works out this way, like this podcast so far has been great, it makes me appreciate it that much more.
Right. And I mean the gratitude to, like I said, a specific being that you feel works for your good versus just luck is,
Just randomness, yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a deeper sense of calm and love and satisfaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I want to say this before I forget. I want to
Sure.
just give you an opportunity. Is there a way that people could find your podcast other than like being friends on my Facebook? Is
Right.
there a way?
Yeah. So if you, I don't know, type into Google, My Bestie Laura is the
My
name of
bestie
my
Laura.
podcast. So you can find us on, if you prefer to watch the videos, I have videos of myself performing these live on YouTube or on Facebook. Or if you prefer just to listen, then you can find me on Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor,
Awesome.
all sorts of different places. My Bestie Laura. And that's my hope. That's why I thought of that name, is that I want you to feel like we're together and that
Yes.
we're companions, we're friends, and I'm here with you. And that's a hard feeling during this time to have. And that was my whole goal in the podcast, is to help you feel like I'm here with you and you're not alone.
So before you started all this, were you a fan of podcasts?
Yes and no. If you can't tell by some of the ideas that I have, I'm a huge, incredible fan of Brene Brown. Like, I fangirl over her like crazy. And if you don't
Okay.
know her, she's this
No, I don't.
emotional researcher who works within gathering data and then presenting that data into stories so that it's more learnable for people, more user friendly. And
Okay.
she researches emotions, and she has a podcast. So I listen to her. I listen to a lot of like murder mystery podcasts,
Those are
which
so
is,
popular right
I
now. I haven't
can't,
gotten into it. I'm scared to get into it because I'm stretched out too far right now. I don't need to
right?
stretch myself out any longer.
Yeah, you just wait until you have like I don't know, I don't want to say the COVID word, but you get a cold, right? Something not so serious, and you have to sit around for a while, or you got a
Right.
long drive ahead of you, and then you get into those murder mysteries, and you will, they're so good.
Yeah. So I noticed that I know obviously because this is how I know you from reading the stories, but you've done some podcasts on some other stuff. You've tackled some topics. Can you share that with us?
Sure. I don't have too many right now because honestly, coming up with the content is difficult for me. And not the content like the small ideas that bring everything together, but I'm really careful in my life about the words that come out of my mouth. Even
That's
in
funny.
arguments, even when I'm really mad, and in my head I'm thinking, what's your problem? You're so stupid. I can't believe you did this.
Are you
You're
doing that
so
right now?
ridiculous. Oh, I have all sorts of things that go on in here, and then
Because you're doing
I
fine. I wouldn't
I
have
just
guessed that at all.
well, I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm not thinking that right now about you. No, no, no. I mean, even in moments where I'm really heated, I think it was teaching high school, honestly, that really molded my expression and changed the way that I communicate with people. How can I speak in a way that is the least defense making and
Okay.
communicate in that way? So if this is the goal, I need the students to work with me, and the student
Right.
is doing these negative behaviors. What the student will not respond to probably is being made to feel defensive. What are you doing? Why are you causing this problem? This is the fourth time you've done this, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. But what you want is for them to feel this partnership, that while I'm in a authoritative role, I want to help you work on this. What's going on? While it's not
Make
acceptable,
them
what
feel
can
like
I
it's
do?
more of a collaborative type thing, so they're more invested. Is that what you mean?
Right. Well, and then
Okay.
again, most people are doing the best they can. And
Yes.
being felt that you should be ashamed of who you are shuts down every kind of learning process that's available in your brain. So how
Was this
can
one of
we
your topics?
no.
Oh, okay.
I mean, see, I have all those little ideas,
Yes.
but it's creating the content that is.
So do you work off a script when you do this, or like how are
Oh,
you?
that's a good question. That's tricky.
Okay.
I have enough key phrases that I really want to get across in an exact way. Those things are written out, but the in between fillers are not. And the order of things I want to discuss are written out in that order.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a certain story that I want to relate, I've gone through it a
Right.
couple times, but it's not word for word at all. Or else it comes
No, no,
across
no.
as disingenuous. And I'll
Yes.
tell you what my pet peeve is when people come across as disingenuous. There have been times where I say to myself in my not very nice mind, I think that person is super nice. They're always kind to me. They're smiling. They're not
Right.
criticizing me. Why do they drive me crazy? And I feel like a terrible person. I'm like, I don't know. And again, I treat them with kindness. It's not that. It's just more like this little nagging voice in my head that's like, oh, they drive me crazy. And then I feel that. Why? And I've noticed that the commonality is that I sense they're not genuine. I sense that they have other feelings or expressions or things they want to say that are different than what they're presenting. And it sits funny on them. It's
Yeah.
almost like they're
So
wearing a mask or something. And I have a hard time
yeah.
with that.
So I have a saying that I've been saying for roughly 20 years, and that's any person I meet or I hear about that everybody likes and everybody loves, I don't trust that person.
Ooh, what does that
And
mean?
right, the meaning or the theory that I worked up behind that is that nobody likes everybody. You ever heard the term "you can't please
Mm,
everybody"? So if
sure.
everybody likes you, you're probably being disingenuous for one.
Mm,
And why are you being disingenuous? What's your? I mean, maybe you don't have some sort of nefarious intentions or whatever, but I really value honesty. I believe our society doesn't really value honesty whatsoever. We say we do. We
so
want you to be
hard.
honest, but we really don't want you to be honest. You know what I mean? So, but I do. I appreciate honesty. Maybe because just the way I grew up, I have a weird brain or something like that. I was always more honest, and I felt like a lot of other people weren't. And I think there'd be a lot less difficulty, especially like interrelational with people, if people would just say honest. Maybe it's harder in the beginning when you're honest with someone, but in the long term, I think the benefits are there. So we're dishonest to sort of cover up something, make someone feel better, but in the
Hmm.
long run, I think we hurt them, the individual, and maybe society, when we should just take the brunt of it, the pain of it up front, and then later on you're better. Or to use a different analogy, if that water's cold in the pool, if you just cannonball and jump in there, yes, you're gonna land in the water and you're gonna scream like, ah, this sucks. But if you go the other way, that's with your toe, your ankle, and your knee, you just prolong the agony. You know what I
You're
mean?
taking off that band-aid super slow instead of
Yes,
just ripping it
yes,
off.
it's worse. It's worse.
So I
And
think
now,
what's
and now the person, if you use your band-aid analogy, now your kid is like more scared of getting hurt and putting on a band-aid because how horrible it was just taking
mm,
off the band-aid. You
they
know?
have like a negative association with
Yes,
that whole
exactly.
experience.
Using those big psychology words.
I think what's so tricky because I in a lot of points totally agree with what you're saying. I want to be honest. I think what's so tricky about what you're saying though is that that implies that there's like a meeting of the minds, that you are both in a place where you are ready to hear that level of honesty. And so rarely
Right.
are
So let me
both
clarify.
people,
I'm not saying that you should be 100% honest all the time. I'm not that crazy.
Yeah.
But my point of my argument was just that, we teach kids honesty is the best policy, but we don't really we don't value honesty as much as I think we should, is what I'm saying. Because you could be honest in a nice way, right? There's ways
Yes.
to do it. You don't need to be mean about it. And
Right.
there's certain times that, okay, I was gonna share something, but I think it's a little bit too personal. I won't. But there's a time in my life where no doubt I had to lie to this person, and I did a great performance, and the person believed me. And I later on shared to that person that I lied, but I did it for the good reason, and it actually worked because that person needed to be comforted at that time. They needed to hear that everything was going to be okay. There's no way in God's green earth I knew that everything was going to be okay, but that person needed to hear it. It made them stronger, and in the end, things worked out better.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose in my mind, instead of, 100% truth or honesty, I would think more, and something I really value is clear communication.
Okay.
And by clear, direct communication, I mean that has compassion and that has kindness and that has an understanding of how can I say this, that everyone has insecure feelings, everyone, you know what I mean? So how can I communicate clearly to my spouse, hey, it's not a huge deal. When you came home late today and you didn't let me know you were going to come home late, it made me like super resentful. It's not your fault.
But look at the way you said that. That was so sweet.
Right. You see what I'm saying? But I'm still keeping myself out of resentment rather than sitting there
I think that's about the ego.
saying,
I think we have to get past the ego. The ego kind of prevents us from doing that. And that's where my, talking to God, for me, like, it humbles me. And if I'm humbled on that level, then I could be humbled in different levels with other people. No, I'm not. Okay, I feel like I'm telling everybody they need to be spiritual. I'm not saying that. But,
I don't think
to get to what you're saying, to the point that you said that, you can't have a big ego, or you can't have like something there preventing you.
No, I mean, what you say as ego, this idea of self, it doesn't exist. Like it exists because we think it, or we're putting ourselves, we have this other idea of self out there that we need to serve that relationship, but like that doesn't exist. It's like I value the relationship with my husband more than I value my relationship with my ego or like my extended
or
self.
Or winning an argument. That's one thing I saw a lot with couples.
Yeah.
They wanted to be right. Well, being right doesn't mean you're going to have a good relationship.
No. My dad is this adorable Japanese man who's pretty, I'm sure he'll love me to say, he's pretty short. So usually you think of an Asian wife and an American husband, usually from a military deployment or overseas. And my parents are the opposite. I have a taller American mother and I have a shorter Japanese dad. And that just tells you like what kind of a baller he was. He is so funny,
right?
So goofy, And one of the things, he has so many coined phrases. He's like imagine the best, cutest, funniest grandpa, and that's him. One of the things he always says is, "Don't forget, Laura, you win by losing." And I didn't really know what he meant.
That's so true. I love that.
But overall, what's the goal? The goal is for us to become closer. The goal is for us to be able to be intimate. And I don't mean physically, I mean emotionally intimate with this person. And if your goal is to win, that's not gonna bring you anywhere. But if the idea you win by losing, like the success is really found in letting go of that desire to win or to become correct, and so many lessons that he's taught me that when I was younger I would just giggle at and think were so silly, and now that I'm older I'm like, wow, he's way deeper than I ever thought that he was.
That's awesome. I'm glad. Wow.
A funny guy.
Can I borrow him for Christmas or Thanksgiving?
I know.
Or what?
He is hilarious. You should see him do, so in Korea they call it norebang, but in Japanese it's karaoke.
Oh,
so when he does karaoke and his face is nice and red with some wine, and he is singing
Yeah,
those Japanese or French songs. He's like speaks a whole bunch of different languages, which I
that's
don't know
awesome.
why, but it wasn't until I was older that I realized how impressive that was. But he sings those songs, and he is the one that really taught me to embrace being a goofball, that being silly and being able to laugh and laugh at yourself is a really important part of life, and to look at things in a lighthearted way. And I never realized, like I said, how much of an impression that had on me until you get older and you see other people who went without or had other experiences, and you think, this really impressed on me more than I had anticipated that it would. And everybody calls him Pop, P-O-P, Pop. Like even neighbors, adult neighbors that are his age and younger, hi, Pop, hi, Pop. That's him. He's everyone's
That's
Pop.
awesome.
He's so
Thank
cute.
you. Thank you for sharing that. We're
Sure.
running out of time here, but is one more thing I wanted to get into.
Sure.
You have the right to deny. It's not necessarily political,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just, I mean, where do you see us? Because I keep hearing the phrase civil war
Ooh.
coming up a lot. A lot of people are saying it, and that we're just so divided. I don't believe that. I believe most people are agree. I think 80% of the people can get along just fine, even though they don't agree on everything. I think it's just the fringes on both sides, on the left and the right. Do you have any
Mm.
thoughts or views that you feel that you could share with us about all that? What I'm trying to say, even though I didn't make it very clear.
No, that's okay. Um, that's so hard. I feel like this moment is a culminating moment of so many different things. To use a really graphic, disgusting analogy, I feel like it's a
Yes,
really
please.
gross pimple on your face that's like
Okay.
finally coming. Like, you're not supposed to touch it, you're not supposed to squeeze it, even though you really want to, it's driving you crazy. I feel like it's finally coming to this like time where okay, now's when you take care of it. Now's
Right.
when you like get at it. And
How do we do that? How do we take care of that?
oh gosh, isn't that the $1 million question? The $1 billion trillion question.
Billion, trillion. Yeah, that exactly.
It's so difficult because so many of us feel, understandably so powerless. And as much as everyone wants to be involved, there's only so much you can do when you become involved. How many marches you can participate in, or, and now it's COVID. It's like, I'll participate via Zoom in this march, you know? What I have found personally, and I do have to say, kind of with an asterisk, is that I am a person of privilege. I am white, I am straight, and financially we're stable. So if those three things weren't a daily struggle for me, or I mean, if those things were, excuse me, a daily struggle for me, and I support my friends and family who that is a daily struggle for them, and I speak out, my motivations and my actions would probably have a lot more justified, angry driving force to them. My friends who and loved ones who worry about their Black kids, Black husbands being pulled over, who worry about how different laws are going to affect them, that's a real struggle. And it's not just a matter of politics or policy, that's a matter of compassion and humanity. And it's easy to disassociate. Well, I shouldn't say easy. I see a lot of people disassociate themselves from that humanity in other people. And that for me is the most disheartening part. Not that you disagree on a policy, not that you disagree on how economics work or what's going to be the best setup for, immigration or something like that. For me, what's the most disheartening is when I see people lose their ability to see themselves or to see humanity in people
To
around them.
empathize.
Empathize. And when we
So,
lose
Laura,
that, oh, things come
thank
to a
you. Thank you.
standstill for me?
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Sure.
And I just want to say one more thing before I go. I think the way that we heal our country and come back together is by people like you doing what you're doing. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are afraid to voice their opinions. Rightfully so. There's a lot of crazy stuff going out there on both sides.
It's very
But
hard to be vulnerable at this time. It's really difficult. I understand it.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Let's do this again sometime
Yeah,
soon.
I loved it.
Have a good one. Bye bye.